Hello there, YouTube. I want to try to bridge the gap a little between video games, reading and other media, because I talk about a few different things on this channel, but it is predominantly books at the moment, and I've been getting more and more into my video games, and more recently I've been watching lore videos on YouTube about the Soulsborne games. Now, I own pretty much the entire series at this point, with the exception of Sekiro. I have a digital copy of Demon's Souls on PS5, which I don't remember getting. I don't remember how I got that. It must have been given away as a PS Plus game at some point, because I definitely never bought it. But I have it digital on PS5 now. I have the PlayStation 3 version. I also have a PlayStation 3 version of Dark Souls 2, largely because I have this copy of the Dark Souls trilogy, which just looks like a black box, because this is the darkest case. You'll see, like, they could not have made this any darker print. It's like a printing error. It looks awful. Like, that says Dark Souls trilogy on it, and it contains, it's just a slipcase as well. I mean, they could have made that a better box, honestly, for the trilogy. But it's got Dark Souls Remastered. Again, these are all the same. These are slightly brighter cases, but not by much. Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, which is terrible. Which is why I still have Dark Souls 2 on PlayStation 3, because Dark Souls 2 on PlayStation 3 is the only real way to play Dark Souls 2 on PlayStation, because if you play the PlayStation 4 version, you're stuck with Scholar of the First Sin, which is the remastered version where they completely changed the enemy placements and they totally ruined the encounter. This is actually a fascinating game to discuss, because this is an example of a hard mode in a Souls game that proves that not only does Dark Souls not need an easy mode, it also doesn't need a hard mode, because a hard mode ruined Dark Souls 2. I made a video about whether or not Dark Souls needs an easy mode or a hard mode. I'll link it in the description below. And I discussed how different difficulties can ruin game balance and game progression. Dark Souls 2 is perfectly balanced for the way it was. It doesn't need to have a hard mode made, and Scholar of the First Sins was a hard mode. Then there's Dark Souls 3. Again, they all look exactly the same. You can barely see them on the camera. That's the trilogy, anyway, for PlayStation. I, of course, have Bloodborne, which I have at least twice over. And technically, I think I have it 3 times over, because I have this physical copy. I also have the PlayStation Plus version, and I have the version that you get for being a PlayStation Plus member and owning a PlayStation 5, because they gave it away digitally twice. So, I own it digitally twice and own it physically. So, Bloodborne. And, of course, Elden Ring. So, I have actually played these games. I don't just own them, I have actually played them. I haven't played all of them. I played Dark Souls 1 and 2. I played Dark Souls 1, didn't much like it. Played Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, absolutely hated it. Have seen videos of Dark Souls 2 and 3, realised that Dark Souls 2, Scholar of First Sin, completely bungled Dark Souls. They just ruined Dark Souls 2 by rebalancing all the encounters. So I'm going to give Dark Souls 2 a chance again with the PlayStation 3 version. And Dark Souls 3 I never tried, because I didn't like Dark Souls 1 and 2, so why would I? But Dark Souls 3 is actually way more linear and looks to be way better balanced, so I'm actually way more likely to give it a try. Bloodborne, I first played and didn't like. However, I've gone back and I now like it. And the reason I didn't like it was because it has such an impenetrable story that you will not know what the fuck is going on or what the hell you are doing. And this is the biggest flaw of this game. This game does not explain a damn thing. The intro cutscene isn't good enough, and the themes are not well enough explained, and no item descriptions are not good enough. Elden Ring has a more cryptic, more complicated story that takes longer to piece together, but it is better told because it actually gives you enough breadcrumbs to follow. You have a reason to keep going. It gives you enough at the beginning that you know where you're going and kind of why you're going there. And by the time you've done a little bit of exploring, you've either gone through the first castle and you've got a reason to do that, or you've explored outside of that. You've hit Caelid, or you've figured out that you can go around the castle, and you ended up whisked away to the Round Table Hold, at which point you've now got loads of NPCs to talk to, and you've started uncovering loads more lore. You can piece together a story in Elden Ring very, very easily, if you want to, or you can ignore it. In Bloodborne, it is damn near impossible to piece together this story. You can't do it. Even if you try to piece it together, you need to be a couple of bosses deep before you can piece together even the slightest piece of story. And it's not good enough on its own to get you that far. You need to have the compelling story to get you that far. Once you've got that, the combat really comes into its own and the gameplay really brings it forwards. Bloodborne is a fantastic game once you get beyond that. There is a video actually by Endymion, I believe it is the channel name. I'm going to link that below as well. That is a breakdown of Bloodborne. It is a fantastic breakdown. He goes over the storyline, he goes over the combat, he goes over all the bosses. It's one of the best, in-depth analysis videos of Bloodborne I have ever seen. I highly recommend the video. One of the best gaming analysis videos I think I've ever seen. He also correctly pronounces amygdala, which is something the Bloodborne and Souls community never does. They always say amygdala because, like most gamers, they are illiterate morons who can't pronounce words, which is why the majority of gamers to this day still pronounce automata wrong in Nier Automata and still say Nier Automata, because they don't know that automata comes from the same root as automaton. They don't understand how words are put together. They don't understand how to pronounce words. They don't know how to speak, and they're too bloody bone idle and too arrogant to look shit up. So he actually pronounced amygdala correctly and didn't say amygdala. Then he ruined it by mispronouncing the word vicar, which I had to give him a dressing down in the comments for. I couldn't let that go. This is not a mistake, by the way, that's unique to his video. I don't know if this is a meme that I'm just not familiar with, but I have seen multiple Bloodborne videos now where multiple Souls channels, multiple channels that cover the FromSoft games, will call Vicar Amelia Vicar Amelia. Do you not know what a vicar is? Are you not familiar with the word vicar? Are there just so many idiots out there that have managed to make it to adulthood and have never encountered the word vicar and don't know what a vicar is? Isn't that like not knowing what a baker or a plumber is? A vicar. Really, you've never heard of the word vicar? Because the amount of people who call her Vicar Amelia, I've even heard people just call her Vicar as if it's her first name. Do you think Amelia is her surname? No, she's a vicar, as in a priest. It's a title. But anyway, as I was saying, these games, they all have really obscure stories, and what I wanted to discuss today is how I believe that if you want to get into these games, you should have a grounding in literature. And the grounding that I'm going to suggest to everyone is simple, and that is HP Lovecraft. This is my leatherbound of Tales of Horror. It's the Canterbury Classics collection, HP Lovecraft. And I am going to go over this in some detail. This is a really quite nice edition, and I would highly recommend this to anyone who wants to get a good background, because not just is Bloodborne heavily influenced by H.P. Lovecraft, so is Elden Ring. Elden Ring is very Lovecraftian. A lot of its background is based in Lovecraftian myth. A lot of the end game is based in Lovecraftian myth, and the final boss is out and out a Lovecraftian character. Bloodborne is out and out directly a Lovecraftian story. It is the story of Nyarlathotep. Just straight up, this is the story of Nyarlathotep. So, read Lovecraft. You will not regret it. Also, the Bloodborne DLC. It's the story of Dagon. More Lovecraft. If you're looking here, first of all, let's have a look. The end papers. Really, really nice design on the end papers here. It's got nice gold leaf. Again, this is gold leaf. It's not sprayed edges. It's gold leaf. This is not sprayed edges. It's gold leaf. Yeah. No one's taking a spray can to the edge of this. I don't know where people got this idea. I mean, I suppose all the fairy loot nonsense has got people believing that that's how this is done. No, this is gold leaf. It is not sprayed edges. But anyway, as we go in, we can see that there is an introduction by Ken Monsheen. I believe that's probably pronounced Monsheen. PhD. The introduction is quite intense. Goes into a fair bit of detail. It goes over his life, terror of the modern race, afterlife, and then it goes straight into his fiction. So, the list of stories in this collection, which I highly recommend, by the way, you can get this for less than £25. When I bought it, it was £22. So this is a really, really nice edition. It's a really solid leather bound, but even if you don't get this edition specifically, you can get a good collection of Lovecraft's work for less than £10. And if you're prepared to go ebook, you can get Lovecraft's work for next to nothing. Some of it's even public domain at this point. So, this is what you get. This is basically the complete work. So you've got Dagon, the Statement of Randolph Carter, the Cats of Ulthar, the Temple, the Picture in the House, the Outsider, the music of Heinrich Zahn, Herbert West Reanimator, the Lurking Fear, the Rats in the Wall, the Festival, the Shunned House, In the Vault, Cool Air, the Call of Cthulhu, Pickman's Model, the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, the Case of Charles Dexter Ward, the Colour Out of Space, the Dunwich Horror, the Whisper in Darkness, At the Mountains of Madness, the Shadow over Innsmouth, the Dreams in the Witch House, the Thing on the Doorstep, the Shadow Out of Time, the Haunter of the Dark, and that is everything. Okay. So, I believe that's pretty much everything. I'm not seeing any obvious missings. Yeah, Haunter of the Dark is the last one. But I just turned over leaf, and that's a picture. That's his portrait. So that is the whole list. There it is. If you want to see it for yourself. So, I would say his most well known would probably be the Call of Cthulhu, obviously, the Colour Out of Space, the Dunwich Horror, At the Mountains of Madness, and the Shadow over Innsmouth. Those would probably be his most well known. There are some there that you may recognise because they have been, the focus of films, like Herbert West Reanimator was a film. The music of Heinrich Zahn is a personal favourite. I quite enjoy that one. It's a very simple psychological horror, that one. But Dagon is one of his best, despite it being his first. It's only 6 pages long. So it's not long. Like, most of his stories are really quite short. Like the Call of Cthulhu starts at page 147, ends on page 171. So that would be 24 pages long. So all of these are short. And what I'm going to be doing is over the next few weeks, as we approach spooky season, I'm going to be going into Lovecraft in detail. I'm going to actually go through and I'm going to be reading each of Lovecraft's stories, and I'm going to be giving my take on them in videos so that you can see what I make of them, and we can discuss them in a little bit of depth. Because one of the things that that people have been talking about on BookTube recently is how short stories don't get enough talk, and Lovecraft wrote pretty much exclusively short stories. He's a short story writer, and he's one of the only short story writers we still talk about, and there's a reason for that. His works actually stood the test of time. Almost no one else's did. Short story works do not stand the test of time unless they are exceptional. Lovecraft's are exceptional. So, I'm going to go over the introduction and Dagon in my next video on Lovecraft, and we'll discuss them in detail. But I want to go over the book itself. The book, high quality leather. It is a bonded leather, so it's not like it's not cut leather. It's bonded leather, which is where they take the leather and they kind of mulch it, turn it into like a leather byproduct, and then they form it into whatever shape they want. So it's not pure leather, but that allows it to be molded into a better shape, and it gives it a little bit more rigidity. It's leather over a fairly substantial card, so it'll last. It'll be quite hardy. Given the price, I don't think you can go far wrong. The bookmark is a pretty standard little cloth bookmark. It's not silk or anything. It's unlikely to fray particularly badly, so I'd go with that. The print is decently sized, I'd say. It's not too big, not too small. You can see through the pages to the print on the other side, but it's not so much that it would be distracting, I don't feel. And the book is not too heavy in the hand. I could sit here and comfortably read an entire story from this 30 pages without an issue. So that's how I feel about this book. I recommend it to pretty much anyone. You can read through any of the stories in this in about an hour, even if you're taking your time. So what I'm going to say is have a go, see what you think. Pick this up. October would not be a bad month to be trying Lovecraft, but if you're not one for reading, I'm sure there are audio versions. But if you don't want Lovecraft, if you want something a bit different, I have another suggestion as well that would also be along the same themes. And again, if you're an avid reader and you've read Lovecraft and you want something that would be ancillary, maybe consider playing games like Bloodborne and Elden Ring. I won't suggest playing the Dark Souls trilogy. I don't think they're good games. I don't. Now, I haven't played Dark Souls 3, and Dark Souls 3, I believe, may well be a good game. I'm going to give it a try, because I haven't played it, and I believe that they have learnt a lot through Dark Souls 1 and 2. They implemented a lot of what they learnt when they made Bloodborne from Dark Souls. Because Dark Souls 1 was made by one company, was made by FromSoft's A team. Dark Souls 2 was made by its B team. The A team went on to make Bloodborne, and I believe they learnt a lot from Dark Souls when they made Bloodborne. Bloodborne was fantastic, but it's flawed. Dark Souls 3 reportedly took a lot of the lessons from Bloodborne and incorporated them, as well as the lessons from Dark Souls 1 and 2. And then all of that has been worked into Elden Ring, and Elden Ring is the culmination of the entire series so far in this huge open world 100 plus hour epic. So Elden Ring is fantastic. That said, it may well be that Dark Souls 3 may be a more directed experience because it's quite linear and it's only about 20 to 30 hours long. So perhaps I'll enjoy it even more. Who knows? We'll find out. But I would strongly suggest that if you enjoy the works of Lovecraft, give these games a try. You might find you enjoy them. You might find that these are the things that will get you into gaming. And if you're going to, watch that video on Bloodborne. Even if you never played the game, watch the video on Bloodborne, because you might appreciate the story that Bloodborne's telling from a literary perspective, where you can see the adaptation of Lovecraft's work, because it is an adaptation of Nyarlathotep. The last thing that I want to do is suggest another work, and that is the Magnus Archives. This is a little ornament I've got. It's just a small ornament that represents the Magnus Archives. Magnus Archives is a little audio podcast. And I bought this because I wanted a representation that I could sit on the shelf to represent the Magnus Archives, because it is one of my favourite pieces of media. It is not necessarily Lovecraftian, it's more urban horror. It's got elements of cosmic horror, but it's more urban horror. And I love the style. It's dripping in a gothic horror style. And I would say the Magnus Archives is one of the best radio dramas that I have ever encountered, and gives you what I don't get from audiobooks, and that is a reason to keep listening. I find when I listen to audiobooks, I zone out. I can't keep my interest. I want to be doing something else. Audiobooks are too passive for me. Whereas the Magnus Archives is one of the few times where I can listen to an audio recording and I feel engaged. I feel completely encapsulated in the stories. The first 8 episodes or so are some of the most engaging stories that I've encountered in a long time. I'll link them below as well. So if you've read Lovecraft, if you've played these games, you want something different, check out the Magnus Archives. It is one hell of a radio broadcast. It's listed on Goodreads as an audiobook, so you can add it to Goodreads if you want to count it towards your reading. They list each season as if it's its own book, and each episode as if it's its own chapter, listing it as if it's a short story collection, which is, to be fair, a decent way of doing it, because each one is about as long as one of Lovecraft's short stories, because they're about 45 minutes to an hour long of a spoken radio drama. So they're about the same length as a Lovecraftian story. But they are fantastic. I highly, highly recommend them. Right. Given that, I'm going to end this video there, and hopefully this has given people a little bit of a push to try out some different media. It's given gamers the impetus to actually look into Lovecraft. It's given readers that push to maybe try a few of these games, and it's exposed maybe a couple more people to the creepiness that is the Magnus Archives. And with that done, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.